After my mother's death, I didn't tell my stepmother and father that she had left me a fortune in money and assets. When my mother passed away, my world fell apart. In the midst of my grief, I discovered that she had left me not just memories, but also an inheritance no one imagined. Fearing what my stepmother and father would do if they found out, I chose silence. It was a decision that completely changed my life. What seemed like a simple secret turned into an intense journey, marked by manipulation, surveillance, and choices that tested my sanity. But they also taught me the value of courage, truth, and inner strength. If you're going through a tough time or have ever felt like no one listens to you, this story is for you. I'm so happy to have you here. Follow my story to the end and comment the city you're watching from. I want to know how far my voice is reaching. My mother's funeral felt like a black and white movie. Muffled voices, blurred faces, and a sky heavy with pain. I sat in the front row, motionless, feeling as if time had split in half. Everything about her was absent now, except for the constant memory in my mind. When I left the cemetery, I didn't go home. I went straight to the notary's office, my hands trembling and my heart heavy. The streets seemed unfamiliar, even though I had known them since I was a girl. Something inside me said that this visit was not just a formality. My mother had always been cautious, and the way she insisted on keeping certain documents already felt like a warning. I entered the old building, smelling of aged paper and polished wood. The clerk looked at me with a kindness that hurt more than it helped. It was as if he knew something big was about to unfold. He led me to a private room and placed a folder on the table. "Your name is here as the sole beneficiary," he said, pointing to a section of the document. The phrase echoed in my mind like an unexpected sentence. I swallowed hard, trying to understand what it meant. My mother had prepared everything without telling anyone, not even me. I signed where they asked, still in shock. When I left there, the world seemed the same, but I was transformed. Now, in addition to grief, I carried a secret. Something she had kept intentionally. Something that now belonged only to me. My mother had left something. Just for me. I spent the night awake rereading every line of the will. It was more than I imagined. Bank accounts, financial investments, a huge plot of land in the countryside, and an old house I didn't even know existed. Everything organized, everything registered. My mother had thought of every detail. There were even instructions for certain documents to be delivered only to me. It wasn't a simple gesture of affection. It was a measure of protection. I tried to remember if during her life she left clues about all this. But my mother was always private about money, especially after she separated from my father. Sometimes I would catch her staring out the window with a distant expression, as if foreseeing that one day I would be alone. Now it made sense. She was preparing the ground to protect me. From whom exactly was still an unanswered question. The strangest thing was the absence of any mention of my father. No clause, no division. She had excluded him completely, and I didn't know if that brought me relief or guilt. Their relationship had ended in silence, and silence remained as an inheritance. As for Vivian, her name wasn't even there. This was no accident. It was a clear message. My mother didn't trust them. I returned to the notary's office days later to regularize everything. I said I intended to keep the country house closed for now, and the rest would remain confidential. There would be no announcement, no official communications to family members. This inheritance was mine and mine alone. No one else knew, and maybe they never would. The next day, my father called me asking if I needed anything. His voice sounded strangely light, as if my mother's death hadn't affected him. He said Vivian wanted to come over to keep me company. "Distract my mind," he said. I politely declined, saying I needed time alone. But inside, an alarm went off. It was too soon for pleasantries. I stored all the documents in a locked folder, which I hid behind old books on the shelf. I also changed the passwords for my emails and bank accounts. Something in me said that any carelessness could be costly. I knew my stepmother. Behind her smiles and impeccable dresses, there was a sharp mind. If she knew anything, she would use every drop of charm to turn everything to her advantage. I remembered times when my mother seemed uncomfortable in Vivian's presence. Forced silences, interrupted conversations. At the time, I thought it was just belated jealousy. But maybe it was disguised fear. Maybe she already knew what that woman was capable of. Now, with all this patrimony at stake, I realized the risk of trusting anyone. I chose silence as a shield. I would do everything alone without alerting anyone. Not even my closest friends would know about the inheritance. I needed time, distance, and vigilance. But as time passed, an uncomfortable feeling began to grow. It was as if someone somewhere knew I was hiding something. But silence, I discovered, has eyes. Vivian appeared at my door with an apple pie and a smile that was too sweet. She said she wanted to fill the void left by my mother's death. I hadn't asked for visits or help, but she acted as if I were a vase about to break. She walked in without ceremony, complimented my haircut, which was the same as always, and sat on the couch as if she owned the house. I observed every gesture, every calculated word. In the following days, she started coming more frequently, always with some affectionate excuse. A cake, a book that reminded her of me, an invitation to walk in the park. The insistence on appearing affectionate bordered on uncomfortable. My intuition screamed that something was wrong. It wasn't care, it was surveillance with velvet gloves. I smiled back but kept my eyes sharp. She started reorganizing small objects in the house when she thought I wasn't noticing. A cushion out of place, a picture slightly tilted. Subtle things, but they escape the control of someone who lives there daily. When I commented, she feigned surprise, almost offended. "Imagine, dear, I would never touch anything without your permission," she said in a voice that was too gentle. But the damage was already done. She knew I was watching. The most disturbing thing was her sweetness. A slippery kindness, enveloping like cloying perfume. It seemed like she wanted to ensnare me in a net of favors and smiles until I stopped thinking for myself. That's when I realized that her presence wasn't company. It was tactics. It was a solicitude that gave me chills. During one of the coffees she herself prepared, she casually commented, "Have you been sleeping well, dear? I noticed you look paler." First, I thought it was just concern. But I soon noticed the pattern. With each visit, there was a new observation about my tiredness, my silence, my appearance. Small comments that, when added up, painted a picture of someone in collapse. She was planting a narrative, one where I was fragile, unstable. Once, she let slip that my mother already showed signs of anxiety in recent years. I had never heard that before. It was as if she was trying to redraw my history, starting from the roots. When I questioned her, she smiled with the air of someone who knows more than they should. "It's normal, my dear, traumas pass from mother to daughter." It was an accusation disguised as empathy. She looked at me as if waiting for the next crack. I began to notice how she tested my emotional limits. Sometimes she would talk about my mother ambiguously, mixing compliments with veiled criticisms. Other times she would offer to help me organize my finances or see a good therapist she knows. I refused firmly, but she never truly backed down. She just took one step back to take 2 steps forward the next day. It was a game, and I was being moved like a pawn without noticing. On her last visit of the week, as she closed the door, she paused and said, looking fixedly, "You seem so lost lately." And then she smiled as if she had complimented me. The phrase hammered in my mind for days. It was as if she was training the world to see in me what I am not. "You seem so lost lately," she said, smiling. My father had always been neglectful, but lately he seemed more absent than ever. Still, in a rare moment together in the living room, he gave me a hesitant look and asked, "Have you been going out? Doing anything to clear your head?" At first, I thought it was genuine concern, but then he blurted out, "Vivian commented that you've been different." That pierced me like an arrow. He was repeating her words, almost like a script. I tried to hide my discomfort, but inside a flame ignited. How could he simply echo what she said, without observing me for himself? My father seemed like a satellite orbiting her, without his own light. When I replied that I was fine, he hesitated. "I don't want you to sink into sadness. You know how emotions can deceive us." Those weren't his words. They were hers, dressed in his voice. That night, I began to question myself. Not about my sanity, but about how I could prove I was sane when everything around me began to distort reality. They were creating an image, and I was the protagonist of a role I didn't choose. It was a trap made of sweet words and false concerns. The more I tried to maintain lucidity, the more it seemed I needed to justify it. That's when I understood. They were orchestrating something. testing the limits of my perception. They wanted me to break. Not physically, emotionally. Because when you lose credibility, you lose everything, including the right to speak the truth. They were trying to make me doubt myself. It all started subtly. A cup out of place, a window slightly ajar that I was sure I had closed. At first, I tried to convince myself that these were distractions due to grief. But the evidence began to accumulate in silence. Cushions swapped sides, my hairbrush turned upside down, the cover of my diary ajar. It was as if someone was passing through when I wasn't there. Or worse, when I was and didn't notice. At night, the noises began. Creaks where there was no wind, slight groans in the floorboards that didn't match the house's structure. Once I heard something like a metallic click coming from the guest room. I got up with my heart pounding but found nothing. Still, fear took root. I started sleeping with the hallway light on and my senses heightened, as if my body knew what my mind still refused to accept. My sheet music started appearing in different orders. I always organized everything by compositions and tonalities, but now they were jumbled. One of my favorite earrings disappeared for 2 days and reappeared inside the sugar jar. Small things, but enough to erode the logic of everyday life. I started writing down every abnormality in a hidden notebook. It was my attempt to maintain sanity, to have proof that it wasn't imagination. No matter how hard I tried to rationalize, the feeling grew like a shadow beside me. I was no longer alone in that house. Even without proof, even without broken doors. It was as if my gestures had an audience, as if every step was followed by invisible eyes. The feeling of being watched became unbearable. One Sunday morning, I gathered my courage and began to search every corner of the house. I took books from the shelves, lifted rugs, emptied drawers. Fear needed an answer. I went to the guest room where the noises seemed more frequent. In the mirror above the dresser, I noticed a small crack in the upper corner. When I removed it from the wall, I found something that froze my blood. A tiny camera hidden behind the glass. I stood paralyzed for a moment, staring at that black dot that looked like a mechanical eye. Who had put it there? And for how long had it been recording? I felt nauseous, as if my privacy had been invaded without permission, and by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. I took the camera with me to the office and began to research similar models. It was professional, discreet, not an amateur's toy. That night I didn't sleep. I turned off all the lights in the house and sat in the dark, listening to every sound, trying to guess where else they might have hidden devices. The walls, the furniture, the outlets. Everything seemed suspicious now. I called Aiden but didn't tell him anything yet. I wanted to be sure before involving anyone. If Vivian or Jackson had anything to do with it, I needed to proceed with caution. Even with the discovery, I knew there was more behind it. That camera was just a glimpse into the veil of what was really happening inside. And the more I thought about it, the more exposed I felt, unprotected in my own home. Who else would be watching my life? In the following days, I turned the house into a silent battlefield. I searched the light fixtures, the books, even the vase in the living room. That's where I found the second camera, camouflaged among the artificial flowers. Then, another inside the Wi-Fi stand. Three devices observing my routine, all well positioned to capture sound and image. Whoever installed them knew exactly what they were doing and what they wanted to capture. There was no doubt left. I was being monitored. I started walking in silence, moving like someone living on a stage without curtains. My home had ceased to be a shelter and had become a varnished prison. With each new discovery, I felt my confidence melt beneath my feet. It wasn't enough to hide the inheritance. Now I needed to protect my freedom, my mind, my own reality. I began to wonder who else knew. Was my father part of this? Were Vivian's visits for more than just observing? It was terrifying to imagine that every tear I cried, every moment of longing for my mother, had an audience. A carefully orchestrated emotional experiment. Was this what they wanted? To make me fragile? To convince me I was losing my mind? Now it wasn't paranoia anymore, it was fact. There were eyes in every room and perhaps ears too. My world was being archived, analyzed, studied by people who should protect me. I didn't know how far they would go, but I knew they were already too close. They knew more about me than I would like. I sat before the small device hidden in the Wi-Fi stand, my heart pounding in my chest. Beside the camera, There was a compartment where I discovered a memory card. I put it in my laptop, hoping to find answers, but everything was encrypted. Hidden files, coded names, confusing dates. That required technical knowledge I didn't have, and more courage than I wanted to admit. I tried downloading free programs to decrypt the images, but only managed to crash my computer. With each frustrated attempt, the anxiety increased. What if the files were deleted? What if they were being accessed remotely by whoever put them there? The idea of losing that evidence made me tremble. I needed to act with precision, but alone I was blind in a minefield. For hours I analyzed forums and tutorials, but everything sounded like a foreign language. I realized that insisting alone would only lead me to error. The truth was there, locked in a digital safe, and I didn't have the key. It was like standing before a foggy mirror, seeing the outline of what I needed to know, without being able to touch it. For the first time, I considered sharing the secret with someone. I took a deep breath and looked at the contact list on my phone. There was only one name capable of helping without asking unnecessary questions. Aiden. An old friend, discreet, loyal. He had technical knowledge and, more than that, he knew me well enough to understand my silences. I can't face this alone. Aiden greeted me with the same childhood smile, but his eyes quickly changed expression when he saw my tension. I explained the essentials. Hidden cameras, encrypted files, distrust at home. He didn't interrupt, just listened, attentive, as if he were putting together a puzzle with every word I said. When I showed him the memory card, his face hardened. This is serious, General. Whoever does something like this has a clear intention. It took only a few minutes to access the hidden directories. He connected the card to his computer, activated a program I would never know how to use, and soon folders with recent dates appeared. Some videos were corrupted, but most were intact. I couldn't watch alone. Aiden put on headphones, watched in silence, and grew tenser with each second. When he took off the headphones, he took a deep breath. You were right. We sat side by side as he explained the content to me. Whispered dialogues, movements inside the house, moments when I was completely vulnerable. Vivian appeared in several recordings, smiling, observing, commenting on things about me. Some parts had interference, but the clear ones were disturbing enough. Aiden made backup copies in 3 different places. This was no longer just a secret, it was a case. He held my hand firmly. Jen, I won't let them do this to you. We're going to organize everything and turn these recordings into evidence. But above all, I want you to know, you're not alone. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to breathe with less weight. He promised. We're going to find out the truth. Throughout the night, we continued watching the files in chronological order. Each video seemed bolder than the last, as if the recorder had felt safe with impunity. In one of the segments, Vivian entered my room, rummaged through my desk, and then left as if nothing had happened. In another, my father appeared in the living room talking to her, but the audio was faint. Then we found that video. It was a more recent recording from the hidden camera in the living room. The image was clear, the sound cleaner. Vivian was sitting on the couch, facing my father. Her face seemed calm as always, but her voice carried a surgical coldness. She's already fragile, Logan. She'll soon collapse and everything will be yours. The money, the house, everything. My father didn't answer immediately. He just looked at her, as if considering the proposal. Aiden paused the video. My stomach churned, the nausea was instant. It wasn't just an insinuation, it was a verbalized conspiracy. My father had heard all of it, and hadn't protested. He was an accomplice by omission. The betrayal there was not just emotional. It was legal, moral, devastating. That sentence was the tip of the spear that pierced through all the doubts I still had. Now I knew what I was up against. It wasn't exaggeration, it wasn't paranoia. It was strategy, manipulation, and greed. They wanted me out of the way, not just emotionally but legally. Vivian told my father. She'll soon collapse and everything will be yours. After seeing that video, I understood that confronting them directly would be suicide. They were already building a narrative about my supposed instability. So, I decided to immerse myself in the version they wanted, but on my own terms. I started to stumble over words, forget objects on purpose, appear confused in simple conversations. It was like wearing a mask. Inside, lucid and attentive. Outside, vulnerable and wavering. With each rehearsed gesture, I observed their reactions. Vivian smiled more often, like someone seeing the plan work. My father started talking to me in a childlike tone, as if I were a sick child. It was revolting, but I had to endure it. If they wanted proof of my fragility, I would give it to them, carefully measured like bait. It was time to enter their game and turn the rules in my favor. Aiden knew about my plan and offered to help with hidden recordings. We installed new devices in strategic locations in the house, without raising suspicion. Everything needed to appear spontaneous, natural, as if I were really slipping into a fragile state. The idea was simple: to provoke their confidence, to make them feel victorious enough to make mistakes and confess. I would let them underestimate my strength. The pain was real, but now it was channeled. Every false tear hid a fierce will for justice. If I fell, it would only be so they could see the height of their fall. If they have a plan, I will have mine too. It didn't take long for my acting to bear fruit. During lunch at my father's house, I heard Vivian whisper on the phone in the garden. I couldn't hear everything, but I caught names. Genevieve. Getting worse. Appointment. Jackson. From then on, she began to openly discuss my mental health. I'm worried, Logan. She's not the same anymore, she would say with a maternal air that made me nauseous. And my father would just agree in silence. Jackson appeared days later for a casual visit. A family lawyer, always formal, always cold. He sat with me and tried to start a conversation but asked strange questions. Have you been sleeping well? Can you focus on work? I answered with forced hesitation, eyes down, as if I were distracted. I saw Vivian observe from a distance, satisfied. They were testing me and I was delivering exactly what they wanted. She mentioned in front of my father that maybe I should see a professional. She said it in a sweet voice but laden with venom. You know, sometimes grief brings imbalances that a person doesn't realize. Logan nodded slowly, and I realized he was letting himself be swayed. It wasn't just Vivian. The whole environment was shaping up to surround me. They were building an argument for something bigger. The word interdiction had not yet been spoken, but it was already in the air, hovering like an unpronounced sentence. Each day, I felt the trap forming around me with more precision. And now, more than ever, I needed to keep my performance perfect until the right moment. They were setting up a legal trap. The opportunity came on a cloudy morning, when I heard muffled footsteps in the hallway. I turned off the kitchen faucet and realized they were in the office. Vivian and Jackson. I grabbed my cell phone and started recording. The door was ajar, and the conversation began low, but soon became clear enough. She's vulnerable, Jackson. She's already acting disconnected. We can proceed with the plan without resistance. Jackson replied with the same legal coldness as always. With the right evaluation and some testimonies, we can declare her incapacitated. She's not able to manage even her own routine. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear the rest. But I held firm. I needed those words recorded. It was confirmation of everything I suspected, now with proof. Their charade was becoming a crime. They continued, detailing deadlines, possible allied doctors, and the documents they would need to forge. It was a cruel, calculated theater, where my collapse would be the grand finale. I left there trembling but determined. With that audio, my strategy had taken the first big step. Their plan was alive, but now so was mine. And I was no longer just reacting. I was silently attacking. I sent the audio to Aiden, who replied with a single sentence. It's all recorded. That night, I slept without medicine, without a light in the hallway. For the first time, fear had given way to certainty. Jackson said, "We're going to declare her incompetent, it's only a matter of time." I started alternating good and bad days, like an actress in a silent scene. I would leave doors open, forget names of common objects, drop glasses, and cry for no apparent reason. Sometimes I would remain silent for long minutes staring into nothing, as if lost in memories. Other times I would purposely speak incomplete sentences on the phone, knowing someone would listen. It was exhausting but necessary. Every staged mistake was another piece in their game. At a dinner at my father's house, I let the fork fall twice onto my plate. I spoke of my mother as if she were still alive, and then corrected myself with tears in my eyes. Logan and Vivian exchanged discreet glances. I saw relief on their faces, as if the confirmation of my fragility comforted them. They were buying every detail of my charade, and that gave me power, control, direction. Returning home was like returning to the stage. My movements were carefully planned. A brief crisis here, a daydream there. I started writing senseless scribbles in notebooks and leaving them visible. I was feeding their monster with the lies they expected to see. But, inside, every step was calculated with precision. It wasn't madness, it was strategy disguised as collapse. And the most disturbing thing was to see how it worked. Vivian smiled condescendingly, Jackson appeared more concerned than ever, and my father began to emotionally distance himself. But none of them imagined that the instability was built by me, under the command of reason. They believed every word I didn't say. While I maintained the facade, Aiden acted behind the scenes with surgical precision. We installed disguised microcameras at strategic points, light fixtures, picture frames, and even inside a pen on my desk. He also positioned microphones in common areas, especially where important conversations usually took place. We were creating our own surveillance system, this time on the right side of the story. Every 2 days, Aiden collected the files, made backups, and organized everything into folders with times and locations. We began to assemble a detailed dossier, with transcriptions and the most impactful excerpts. Some recordings captured Vivian talking to herself on the phone, rehearsing versions of facts. Others showed Jackson making suspicious calls in a low, hurried tone. It was like putting together a puzzle in reverse. We had the pieces, and the image revealed itself to be frightening. Vivian commented casually about my deterioration, as if she were the spokesperson for my mind. In one of the recordings, she even said that the diagnosis will come soon. Aiden edited the most compromising parts and saved copies in different places. Pen drives, cloud storage, and even a hidden hard drive at his grandmother's house. By this point, losing the evidence was unthinkable. It would not only sustain my sanity, it would save my freedom. With each new file, we felt we were closer to the inevitable confrontation. Their masks were cracking, and the evidence, now undeniable, were our silent weapons. The dossier was almost complete. Day after day, my father became a shadow of the man I once knew. He avoided eye contact, responded with short sentences, and rarely stayed alone with me. When he insisted on talking, he would change the subject or pretend not to understand my questions. It was evident that Vivian influenced him from all sides, shaping his opinions as if she owned a thought that no longer belonged to him. Once I tried to talk to him about the cameras, testing how far I could trust him. His reaction was one of complete disbelief. "Are you sure about this, daughter? Maybe you're seeing things." The phrase, spoken calmly, had the effect of a punch. He didn't question the existence of the cameras. He questioned my perception. It was Vivian's script, now recited in his voice. The betrayal hurt more coming from the one who should defend me. In the moments we were together, he seemed restless, like someone living with a secret and not knowing how to hide it. Sometimes, he would observe me as if looking for traces of madness where there was only disguised resistance. It was difficult not to scream, not to break the act. But I needed to let him dive into that fog until he could no longer deny his own role in the plot. I realized that my father was not just manipulated. He had chosen not to see. It was easier to believe that his daughter was sick than to admit that he had married a woman capable of destroying someone in silence. My father had disappeared within himself. The visit to Grandma Iris's house was an impulse, but perhaps the most necessary one I'd had in months. I took the car on a cold morning and drove in silence, feeling my mother's absence weigh even heavier on the way. My grandmother's house, with its old windows and smell of cinnamon, had always welcomed me as a refuge. Seeing me at the door, Iris didn't ask questions. She just opened her arms. I surrendered to the embrace like someone returning to their last safe harbor. We sat in the living room, where the wall clock seemed to mark a slower time. I drank tasteless tea, without speaking for several minutes. She just watched me, patient, her clear eyes fixed on mine. It was as if she knew I carried something heavy, and was just waiting for me to let it go. When I tried to start telling everything, my voice faltered. The words came out broken by fear, frustration, and accumulated exhaustion. "I don't know who to trust anymore," I murmured, hoping for some comfort. Iris didn't answer immediately. She just kept looking at me, serious, firm, but without harshness. "Then the time has come," she said. as if the conversation had already been written before it even began. A shiver ran down my spine. That phrase didn't seem generic. It seemed specific, as if she were talking about something she already knew. That's when I realized that perhaps I wasn't there to tell anything, but to listen. She looked at me as if she already knew everything. Iris slowly got up and went to an old piece of furniture, from which she took out a dark wooden box with a metal clasp. She came back with it in her lap and placed it between us. "Your mother asked me to keep this. She said that if you ever felt surrounded, I should give it to you." My heart raced. I opened the box carefully and found a stack of letters, yellowed by time, all addressed to me, but never sent. My mother had written dozens of pages at different times over the past few years. Some dated back to the period when we lived alone, others after my father's marriage to Vivian. Each line revealed fears she hadn't shared in life. She spoke about feeling watched, about Vivian's coldness, about noticing a slow and dangerous transformation in how my father was distancing himself. It was as if she was narrating what I myself was living now. "She thought she wouldn't be here to protect you. And she was right," Iris said, her eyes welling up. I couldn't hold back the tears. It was like hearing my mother for the last time, with words preserved in time, waiting for the exact moment to reach me. The pain of loss mingled with the relief of discovering that I wasn't going crazy, that everything I felt had already been perceived before. And then, between one letter and another, came the name I feared, Vivian, written with caution, in phrases that mixed apprehension and clarity. My mother had already feared her long before anything happened. Letters written years earlier spoke of Vivian. Among all the letters, one in particular caught my attention. It was short, written with a firmer hand, and had only one word as a title, caution. In that paper, my mother made it clear that she suspected Vivian's intentions from the beginning of her relationship with my father. She said there was something in her eyes that never inspired trust. A calculated gleam, like someone who analyzes and anticipates. That letter sounded like an urgent warning that I was only now able to understand. She spoke of strange episodes, interrupted conversations when she entered the room, the husband's documents disappearing and returning in altered versions. She said that when confronting Vivian, she only received sweet smiles and words that answered nothing. "She is a woman who speaks little but hears everything," said one passage. "She doesn't want a home, General, she wants control." The words burned on my skin like hot iron. Iris followed everything in silence, only touching my arm from time to time. That explained so much. My father's coldness, the way he let himself be manipulated, the fact that my mother had hidden the inheritance. It was a chain of decisions made out of fear and love. She had foreseen the storm, but gave me the tools to survive it. Now it was up to me to use them wisely. I closed the box with a mix of reverence and pain. That inheritance of words was more valuable than any money. She couldn't protect me in life, but she left me a map to resist. And I would never let all that have been in vain. My mother tried to protect me even after death. After my mother's letters, I understood it was time to stop resisting in silence. I had evidence, video testimonies, audio recordings, and now prophetic words from the past. Aiden and I spent days reviewing the files, separating the most impactful segments. We needed something irrefutable, something that would expose Vivian, Jackson, and even my father without leaving room for denial. We decided there would be no direct confrontation. Yet, the idea came while we were having coffee at Aiden's house. "They rely so much on control that they wouldn't see an emotional trap," he said. That's when I suggested dinner. A reconciliatory gathering pretending to seek peace. It would be the perfect environment for a public revelation, with no escape. They would relax, talk more than they should, and be confronted at the exact moment, with the evidence displayed before their own eyes. We reviewed the sequence of videos. Vivian alone, Vivian with my father, Jackson articulating, my father consenting in silence. Short, direct, impactful segments. I even recorded a brief introduction, explaining what would be shown. I wanted it to be clear that I knew everything, that I was never confused, just waiting. For the first time, I felt that fear was giving way to strategy, and that I was finally ready to face them. The dinner would not be just any moment. It would be the climax of the play they had been staging for so long. Only now, I was the one controlling the narrative. The stage was set, and dinner would be the show. I sent out the invitations by message, with a light and affectionate tone. I would really like to have a family dinner, to resume dialogue and reconnect. I wrote this with steady hands and a burning stomach. It wasn't long before everyone replied. Vivian was the first. "It will be a pleasure, dear." Jackson confirmed coldly. My father with reservations. "Of course. I think it's a good idea." They were convinced that the game was already won. I took advantage of the reconciliation atmosphere to reinforce the welcoming tone. I said I would prepare the meal myself, that I wanted to create an intimate family environment. Vivian even suggested bringing a dessert, which, coming from her, was a poisoned gift. Jackson asked if anyone else would be present, and I replied no. I wanted them to feel at ease without suspicion. Their trust was the key to success. Aiden offered to stay nearby, even if outside, monitoring everything remotely. We positioned cameras that would capture their reactions clearly. He would handle the audio-video synchronization and security. At the right moment, everything would be revealed. Every lie, every manipulation, projected as in an emotional courtroom where the truth would finally have a voice. Deep down, they thought they had broken me. That the fragile, confused Genevieve had finally given up resistance. They believed they were being invited to reap the rewards of their trap. And that's why they accepted so quickly. Everyone accepted, confidently. The day before the dinner, I organized every detail with the precision of someone about to stage a revelation. The table was set with care, silverware aligned, gleaming glasses, soft lighting in the room. But behind the delicacy, there were hidden wires, discreet microphones, and a strategically placed projector. Aiden tested everything more than once. The videos were ready, edited, and synchronized with a discreet remote control in my hand. We exchanged knowing glances with each completed step. He knew how much it cost me, emotionally, physically, psychologically. But he also knew it was necessary. There was no longer room for doubt or omission. When we turned on the projector for the final test, I saw my own face appear on the screen. It was the video I recorded addressing them directly. I saw myself firm, looking into the camera's eyes. And I felt proud. I also separated the physical evidence. Documents, transcripts, copies of my mother's letters. Everything inside a black folder, organized chronologically. Even if they tried to deny the images, the papers were there as a second blow. We had double backing. With each revealed layer, they would lose control. And I would regain mine. That night, before falling asleep, I looked in the mirror and saw a version of myself I had never seen before. Sober, determined, intact. Dinner would be more than a confrontation. It would be the final liberation from silence. They don't know what awaits them at the table. The dinner began with a civilized silence, filled with forced smiles and cutlery clinking on empty plates. Vivian complimented my food, Jackson commented on the wine, and my father seemed uncomfortable from the first sip. I waited for the right moment, let them settle into their own theater. When everyone's guard was down, I calmly stood up and turned off the main lights. Then, I pressed the remote control, and the projector illuminated the wall. The first scene was clear. Vivian on the sofa, talking to my father about my supposed emotional fragility. The audio was crisp, her expression serene, almost clinical. None of us said a word. The second video followed. Jackson on the phone, mentioning my name and using the term interdiction, as if discussing any contract. Their gazes began to flutter. I simply observed. Then came the segments of Vivian alone in my house, rummaging through my belongings, rearranging objects, murmuring phrases that incriminated her. Every image, every sound, a precise blade cutting through the masks they had worn for months. Jackson stiffened. Vivian brought her hand to her neck, as if she couldn't breathe. My father remained motionless, but his eyes, now, darted between me and the screen as if searching for an escape. I waited a few more seconds and paused. The silence weighed like a verdict. I didn't need to say anything, the images spoke for me. And then I saw Vivian paled, Jackson froze. Immediately after the third video, my father raised his hand, as if he could erase everything with a gesture. "Genevieve, I think we've seen enough," he said, his voice choked. His face was pale, and he avoided looking at the screen. But I didn't hesitate. I pressed the remote again, and another video began. "We're not finished yet, Father," I replied firmly. "You need to watch until the end. All of you do." "The next scene was the hardest," Vivian sang, in a calm and venomous voice, that I would soon collapse, and that everything would be his. The phrase hung in the air like a sentence carved in marble. My father closed his eyes for a moment, as if trying to block out the sound with his body. When he opened them again, he didn't speak. He just took a deep breath and looked at me. For the first time in a long time, I saw shame in his eyes. As the last segments played, I realized he had nowhere left to hide. He was the man divided between his daughter and the woman who manipulated him. But now there were no more excuses, no room to pretend neutrality. The truth was projected before him, like a cruel mirror. And in that reflection, he no longer looked like a father. He looked like a silent accomplice. When the last video faded, silence settled like a sentence. Their faces were pale, the table untouched. And I, for the first time, was not trembling. My father couldn't look me in the eyes. Vivian was the first to speak, trying to recompose her expression. "These images, they're out of context. They were manipulated. This is a setup." Her voice was sweet, but trembling. Jackson, more restrained, merely cleared his throat and looked away. I looked at her calmly and opened the folder on the table. I took out the documents, the screenshots, the transcribed files, all with dates and verification seals. Aiden had validated every second. "These are the originals," I said. "No cuts, no editing. I can show you now if you want." Vivian fell silent, but her eyes burned. Her confidence seeped out from under her makeup. She tried to maintain her composure, but her fingers drummed nervously on the wine glass. Jackson wiped his forehead with a napkin and muttered, "This is not what it looks like," before falling silent for good. Their power evaporated minute by minute. My father remained silent, his face turned down. He didn't try to defend anyone, and he didn't defend me either. It was the summary of all his omission, present but absent, an accomplice not by action but by silence. I no longer expected to reclaim his love. I just wanted him to see what he allowed to happen. And in that moment he saw. There were no screams, no theatrical confrontations. Just the slow, painful fall of a charade that had lasted too long. And ironically, now she was the one who seemed unstable. I handed the flash drive to the prosecutor with steady hands, though inside everything still trembled. He received me in his office with an attentive expression, listened to every detail without rush, and reviewed the files with seriousness. I didn't need to explain much. The videos and audio spoke for themselves. There was solid evidence there, names involved, intentions revealed. I was, at last, placing the truth in the hands of justice. Justice needed to see what I had lived. Within a few days, Jackson was subpoenaed and had his license temporarily suspended by the Bar Association. The recordings showed his biased actions and connivance with illegal plans. Vivian, in turn, received an immediate restraining order, prohibited from approaching me or my house. The judge was clear: manipulation, coercion, and signs of psychological abuse. What seemed impossible was finally happening. None of this would have happened if I had given in. With everything crumbling, my father came to me. He brought flowers in his hands and remorse in his eyes. He said he was deceived, that he didn't realize what was happening. He asked for forgiveness, repeating that he wanted to fix everything, to be my father again. I listened silently without interrupting, not out of coldness, but because of everything his silence had already cost. It was too late to go back in time, and impossible to pretend nothing had happened. I didn't scream nor did I cry. I just said that what he allowed hurt more than what they did to me. I didn't respond to his plea for forgiveness, and he understood. The door closed without anger, but with firmness. The broken bond was not of blood, it was of trust. And that he let fade away. Father or not, he was a silent accomplice. Now, I'm curious about you who heard my story. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Have you experienced something similar? Support the channel. Subscribe, like, comment, and share this video. I'm leaving another story on the end screen that you'll also enjoy, and it will definitely surprise you. Thanks for watching until the next video.